Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome back to Record Breakers. Back on the horse, back on the bike, back in the thing, back in the seat, back in the hot seat, back in black. We're here, talk about music, share music with each other as a quorum, as friends, as comrades. Here, I'm Peter Raven, man with no plan. Here with me, as always, is my team. We've got Brett.
Do the Donkey Kong.
We've got Drew.
I think I've caught Pac-Man fever.
Mm-hmm. And we've got Patrick.
I can't think of another video game related song to reference right now.
Yes. I like that. That was just one of my favorites. It's a good classic off of Buckner Garcia's lesser known works.
American Communism.
Sorry. Buckner and Garcia's lesser known work is great.
That would, you know what? That would make a great nerdcore album name of some unrelated nerdcore rapper. It's just some nerdcore rapper entitles the song Buckner and Garcia's lesser known works. Never references it.
Get on that, Mega Ran.
Yeah.
No, Mega Ran doesn't reference it, but the entire song is about the ghosts from Pac-Man and not actually Pac-Man. So he has to make up rhymes about Blinky.
Yes.
Clyde.
All right.
Clyde, yeah.
Before we go on a further tangent, we are here to talk about music. The provider of said music this week, now that we're back from our little unplanned hiatus, we're back here. The provider of the music is Patrick. Patrick, what do you got for us?
So I brought a new album from an old band, Dinosaur Jr., and their 2016 release, Give a Glimpse of What You're Not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brett, I'll ask you, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
Well, as a really short recap of my relationship with Dinosaur Jr., for those of you who weren't here last time we listened to them, I never really followed them. And even after listening to them for the show, I didn't ever go back. They're just not a band that was around me and the people that were around me listening to music. And I also had a pub trivia team named Vaginosaur Jr. I was unaware of this album, and I was curious if this would change my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I don't really listen to much Dinosaur Jr., if at all ever. So this was sort of me going like, okay, what is this going to be about? If they're a band from back in the day, a band that was sort of a cornerstone of alt-rock in the 90s, what would something modern sound like from someone that sort of gave rise to that sort of sound? Let's see what happens. And that was sort of all I went into it with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a hard act, after Dinosaur Sr., hit the stage and rock the world. Following it up's a real tough gig. So,
that is for sure. I
really feel for and Dinosaur the Third, playing space rock. That's man.
Yeah.
Warped Tour stage like 11, but yeah.
I hear Dinosaur the Fourth is coming out with an alt country record.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, Patrick.
Gonna have a featuring of the lead singer from Old Crow is what it's gonna do.
Patrick, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes elements that make it up?
So Dinosaur Jr., I'm going to do a little history. They started in the mid-'80s and kind of rose to prominence with alternative rock in the early 90s. They're one of those bands that's on that list of your favorite band's favorite band, I think. They're pretty influential, but also like just, a band people really like. There was at least at one time where Kurt Cobain really wanted Jay Mascis to be in Nirvana before it was Nirvana. They're basically a rock band. With like sort of equal parts, like sort of fuzzy, jangly classic rock, but also like they grew up listening to punk and noise rock, so you get a little bit of both mixed together. It's sort of to me, it's as nostalgic as it is kind of like innovative and refreshing, especially given that they're still doing this 30 years later. And they still sound like Dinosaur Jr. in kind of a good way. I could have gone back and like picked a softball like Without a Sound, which is, from like 94, from like the core of their thing. But I ended up listening to this album. I feel like 2016 was kind of a mediocre year for music after 2015 was amazing. And this ended up kind of being one of my favorite albums of the year. So I thought I'd bring it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brett, how would you describe, what would be the themes elements that caught your attention on this album?
I mean, this is a familiar formula to us, the people who have heard more of this band. But it's dirty guitar, downbeat lyrics. There's nothing really shocking or new with the sound of this album. It's practically made up of everything you would expect to be in the ingredients list of an album. And that's not a bad thing. You come into this expecting something and you get it. It's produced pretty well. There's overall a really, really good room tone to everything that's recording. Nothing earth shattering, but it's really good. You get like a good mix of well-sounding jangle and some dirt. It's not all noise. The album breathes as it goes along. You're not just constantly going from banging metal chairs to banging wooden chairs. It's not just dirt on top of dirt. There's time to breathe. It's not as painful to listen to in your earbuds as you might think. But yeah, there's a lot of times that this album slows down, and it's very good for the album because of that.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be the themes elements that caught your attention?
Well, before I get to mine, it's actually funny, like, as Brett said that, he makes a really good point about the sound of the record, where some records, especially lately, from any band, will sound produced to the point where all you're hearing essentially is the instruments. There is a bit of roominess to it that I think is kind of cool. And actually, oddly enough, this morning I was watching YouTube videos with my father before we went to a family party of like old Skinnerd and stuff like that, because that's what me and my dad do for fun, I guess. Remembering like that era and having that sort of classic rock, you heard sort of a rawness to it at times, which I think is really cool. Even in those like arena rock bands, and hearing a little bit of that here, he makes a very valid point, and I didn't make those two connections until just this moment. But the weird thing about this album to me in 2016, it made in 2016, or not in 2016, but being made in 2016, is that it makes me feel a bit nostalgic, in a weird way. It's one of those bands that, like I said, I never really dove into. They were a list of shame for a long time for me, because I knew I should, because like Pat said, it's your favorite band's favorite band, and like you should probably go and see what inspired the people that inspire you, and I didn't, and that's my fault for not really diving really deep into Dinosaur Jr. at all. Part classic rock, part punk rock, part noise rock. It's just this mash of things that, like, if you're familiar with like the mid-90s alt rock scene, you know the people that were inspired by Dinosaur Jr. That crunch in the guitars is great, but there is parts where there is some jangle, there's some openness to the guitars and an open feeling to the music that's really, really cool. It's something that made me want to be a kid again, just in the back of the car listening to, I know I've referenced this station before, but a local station, 88.9, The Alternation, and just like sort of discovering what, yes, it's run, like the radio tower is behind the football field of a local high school, or at least it was when I was a kid, which I think is kind of cool. But it was that time of like discovering like what I liked in music and stuff like that, and just being really happy when my parents would let us choose to listen to 88.9 and stuff like that. It's something that's awesome. The one thing that I could say that was kind of a problem for me, a little bit, was at times just forgetting where I was in the record and no one song jumping out at me and being super memorable. Is it the sort of drone on the vocals? Is it that overdriven noise rock side that they sometimes dive into? I don't know, but me picking out individual tracks for this record was harder than on most other records we dive into, and that was kind of weird, but overall I think the album was kind of solid. So
I had the same issues with picking individual tracks out because this is essentially the same music that's been made since we were kids, and it's just sort of a sound that we lived on that as children. So yeah, I could see how it could kind of be difficult to be like, oh hey, this fresh new thing.
Yeah, it's kind of it flows together. I think that's the cutting edge sword. It flows together, but it more than it melts into a mass, but it tends to kind of make you forget individual tracks, I guess. Also, I love the reference to your favorite station. Made me think of the only FM station I've been excited about recently. Here we have Shake 108, which is a cool thing because it was a dude that won frequency access to a frequency at 107.9, and he just started playing stuff off his playlist and transmitting it off of FM radio.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think late at some point he had to get better equipment and he had to start being a little bit more formal, but yeah, it's I didn't know about them until my brother told me about it, and it was yeah, it's really cool. It's just a dude. It's a non-profit station. It's awesome. And they just play different mixes. They have a local time, they have they play different styles, alternative things like that. It's cool.
Would they play a 4-person review podcast of albums?
That would be awesome.
Yeah, gonna hit the tower of power, all 8 watts.
Yes,
coming to you.
That would be awesome. If we was local, record breakers every, I don't know what the hell.
On your terrestrial dial.
Yeah.
On 1540.
Yes.
Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 5 o'clock. Come listen to
before
2 episodes of the Record Breakers podcast.
That'd be hilarious. But yeah, back to the matter at hand. Patrick, what will be some of the key tracks for you?
So I'll do the Record Breakers thing and talk about the opening track, Going Down. J Mascis has the sickest of guitar tones. There are many guitar players with sick guitar tone, and he is one of them. And this song's got a really, really good riff too. The vocals are what J Mascis does. It's kind of drony and weirdly. It's weird. It's J Mascis, and I don't think anyone else really sounds like him. People have compared it to Neil Young, and he kind of hates when you do that. But that is probably not the most inappropriate of a comparisons. They're very laid back, and they're kind of more buried in the mix than a lot of stuff. So you get that. With this song, you can hear the bass doing some cool stuff underneath the guitars, but it is really a guitar attack. And this album for me, it's it's rock and roll music in a time when that is, I think, not, there's not nearly enough of it. Be Apart. I find J Mascis's voice really comforting in a weird way. And this song, it's got some parts that are a little more laid back and low key, and I like his voice. It makes me very relaxed because it isn't super aggressive, super angry, super aggro. He's just singing stuff, and in kind of this weird, slightly drony way. And this song, you get a really good density of it, where if a thing I sometimes do, especially if I've listened to an album for a while, is I start honing in on individual parts, trying to listen to the bass line or listening to the guitars or what the drums are doing. And this song, there's a ton to really dig into. And then Good to Know, which is another, I think, really good guitar heavy track. You can hear and this is probably something you would only hear in headphones, unless you have like better speakers than me, which is, you would have to have spent some money. You can hear that clearly the guitars are overdubbed, and they put one of the recordings left and one of them right. And the weird subtle differences between them, like you can hear if you're listening to it, but then when you hear them together, they sound really, really cool. And it has a really fun guitar solo. I forgot how much I sometimes like guitar solos, and I like what Jay Mascis does, because they're just like bluesy classic rock solos. They're not, crazy Eddie Van Halen or like Steve Vai acrobatics. They're just fun, lots of guitar bendy things, and half a dozen distortion pedals at varying levels.
Mm-hmm. Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Going down. It's a simple palm mute groove spread across the song to pretty good effect. It's a pretty well put together track, and I could see why they placed it where they did. Tiny is a 90s ass song. It's one of those tight little nuggets of the 90s that will stick with us forever. It was definitely something that in repeat listens I was like, wait, okay, there's something more here, but I don't really have words to describe. Like there's a lot of things that like if I could be like, okay, this time code, hey, that thing right there, like the genesis of Sproing was, hey, listen to that thing. What the fuck is that thing? What is it? There are some things also in like the tone and the way that they make it. The equipment that I believe it doesn't use like a Jazz Master.
Yeah, vintage Jazz Masters with Seymour Duncan antiquity pickups.
Yeah, I run in guitar circles and I play the vintage game. People don't play those things very often. That was of the time, and
his are slightly modified. He has a tune-o-matic on him, so they're a little easier to play. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, Jay Mascis gear videos are really interesting because the guy has like the most ludicrous pedal board setup and a bunch of old amps.
And one of my old customers when I worked sales was a huge fan, and I sold him the Jay Mascis signature, and he like came in all the time before then playing the stuff, and it's a very, very distinct sound that he was being able to get out. And I wish I knew more about it. I will have to go and do homework. But yeah, it's not your standard, hey, this is a guy with a Strat and a dirt box, or hey, it's a Les Paul and a dirt box and a big amp. There's some nuance in here. And you get that, especially when you have a genre of music where, the clipped out, like fuzzed out grunge at different levels, than you normally would. Like, it's not just straight up clean. It's not straight up dirty. It's very dynamic dirt. Dynamic Dirt. If we named podcasts, that would be the name of this one. Dynamic Dirt. But yeah, there's something about that. And on the track I Walk for Miles, they do that as well, where it's just a simple grungy groove where, like, it's very reactive to your how hard you're hitting it, but it's paired with like some really, really heavy drums that, like, as a song like, hey, we got a drummer, why don't we like make him do some work right now? And they made a song where the drummer did some work, and it had way more of a guitar solo than I was expecting. It might all just be minor gin and tonic, but it's there. It's not the Boodle Deedle Doos. It's not it's not Alan Holdsworth. Yeah. But there's more guitar solo than I've ever expected to hear on this album. So that was a nice little treat. Yeah. But again, it's hard to pick songs out of this album. It's more of it's an album you sit down and play front to back. Yeah, those are the three tracks that really stood out to me.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
So, Tiny, I'm gonna go into. Yeah, I know it's not the opener. Sorry. The opener was good fun. Droning vocals sort of get you into fun guitar lines, but Tiny was the song that I was humming at work. Tiny was the song that was bouncy and fun. It was easily my favorite song on this record. And it's one of the ones where I like a good song that can make me dance in my chair, and the song made me dance in my chair. Love Is I had to bring up because there are some good old-fashioned guitar flexing solos in that. Yeah, it's not super complicated. We're not talking about, if I can bring up Skynyrd again, we're not talking about like the weirdness that was Skynyrd in some of those solos or anything like that. But it was some cool soloing that was done by guitar. I'm not a huge fan of solo-filled rock and roll most of the times, but when it works, hey, it works. I can't really deny that. And if we're gonna go with like a more slower / mid-tempo-y type of jam, Lost All Day is the one I'm gonna bring up. I don't know why the tone of this one I just dug a lot. There was that, like Brett was mentioning earlier, that open, jangly type guitar that was working a little bit in that song. And it's one of those songs that like that reminds you of something, like kicks that nostalgia itch in the back of your brain, and you don't know exactly why, and it's going to bug me for about a week until like all of a sudden it clicks. I'm going to be in the middle of the work and I'm going to yell something and nobody's going to know what I'm talking about. It's okay. But it's going to happen. It's going to scare a client. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, yeah, I love those moments where it's like, oh, fiddlesticks. Oh, sorry. Sir, how can I help you out? What seems to be a problem with the computer there? It's one of those beautiful moments in life. And sometimes it gets you institutionalized. You never know. Yeah, we got some key tracks. Let's bring it back around the horn to do some conclusive thoughts on this album. Brett, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album as a whole?
It's a pretty okay album. My mind was not blown, but I didn't really have any struggles listening to it. And listening to it as many times as you have to milk all the content we can get for your listening pleasure, listener. But if you're at all into any of this, guys playing the same style of music as has been, played since the late 80s kind of thing, just gussied up and a little better. And if you like guys that have straight up Draco Malfoy haircuts, there are a few haircuts better. This is an okay album. It's worth your listen. Give it a try. Do the Pepsi challenge.
Yeah.
Set it right next to it. Like, I don't know what your Coke to Pepsi would be.
I don't know.
But it is definitely a great taste that tastes great
here
together with us. So
yes.
You should already listen to it anyway. Butthole.
Yeah. That's why we
classic
do this
rock in my alternative radio. Like, I don't understand what's happening right now. Why are we?
I don't know. Drew, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album?
Again, like I said, it's Dinosaur Jr. has never been something I've dug much into, and I know I should. And this band could have very easily have hung it up, been good with what they did at the time. They got back together, and they're still making music that a lot of times when a band does that, and they get back together after a time, it doesn't end up good. It ends up pretty bad, and this ended up pretty good. You usually can't find a band from the 70s, 80s that if they broke up, get back together and make awesome music continuing, and Dinosaur Jr. did it, and that's pretty okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this does harken back to a time and place, especially their time and place.
Yes.
With some, their very time and place, which is, it's like they just decided, let's just get back on this horse and ride it like old times. And it's not a bad thing. It has a nice feel to it and has a nice sound to it. It gives you some nostalgic feels and takes you for a good honest ride. Yeah.
Those dishonest rides, Petey, I hate them.
Yeah.
This ain't one of them.
Yeah, no. This gets a 5-star in my Lyft review. Patrick, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album?
I really enjoyed Dinosaur Jr. and I was really happy to see that they still can make a good record in 2016. Considering my favorite album of theirs is from 23 years ago. Go listen to this. Go listen to Without a Sound, which is probably their most popular record, or kind of anything from like the late 80s and early 90s. I feel like they're underappreciated, and they should be. They're really good, and rock and roll ain't completely over
Wait,
yet.
you're saying they should be underappreciated?
No, they're more underappreciated than they should be. They should be very appreciated. I don't know words. I don't know how words work.
This is a hot banger tonight. We're on our A game. This is we should take a month off again.
But
took all that pent up banter.
Yeah.
If you like rock music, and especially like if you are like a lot of people and really like 90s alt rock, this is very much fits that, but also is kind of unique and doesn't just sound like a Pearl Jam cover band like far too many of those bands do. So go listen to it. It's good.
Here at Record Breakers, we practice tantric podcasting.
That's right. We do.
Yes. All right. So those are our thoughts on Dinosaur Jr. Now we get to the main event of the evening. We get to our haiku reviews. We get to what we've all been waiting for, summing it all up incompletely into poetic form for your fun and amusement. Let's start. Let's just go same order. Brett, what is your haiku?
It's our second round. What you expect and more. Some clipped out noise rock.
Drew, what is your haiku?
Check it off my list. Finally heard a record from a cornerstone.
Mm-hmm. My haiku, a bit nostalgic, pulls from alternatives past, a decent listen. Patrick, what is your haiku?
30 some years in and still making great music. Rock and roll ain't dead.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think I double checked, and I don't believe we've actually done Dinosaur Jr. in a past episode. So,
I'm smelling burnt toast. We haven't.
We've definitely done Dinosaur Jr. adjacent bands, but not Dinosaur Jr.
We did Clutch.
I went through and looked actually. We did Clutch. We did Bob Mould.
The beginning of this, when you said that, was me going through and being like, "Oh shit, do I have to rewrite my haiku at the beginning of this?" And then I didn't find it.
I definitely have considered doing them before, but I have not yet.
It's one of those odd things.
So maybe it's from your other music podcast.
Yeah, like we've reviewed Armageddon like 20 times.
Yes,
haven't reviewed it once.
Yes. All right. So those are our thoughts on Dinosaur Jr. You can of course find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers the home game. Play along at home. Follow along with us on that same Spotify playlist. Will be Brett's pick. Brett, what do you got for us next time?
Got some more 90s noise rock stylings of Steely Dan and their album Can't Buy a Thrill.
Yeah.
It's that one.
Yes. Yes.
You buried the lead on that one, sir.
Steely Dan with their, I remember them and their flannel and their jeans and their mom sweaters and
the puka shells.
Yeah. Yeah, they were true 90s legends.
That's right. Grunge rock piano, electric sitar, all the things you expect from, an up and coming band out of Seattle.
Yes. Yes. All right. So Steely Dan next week. That'll be next week. Look forward to that discussion. But that's next week, and this is this week. You can, of course, find us all over the internet. Patrick is at Swagger. Brett is at HeyBBBibbard, HIBBITYBIBBARD. Drew is at XJuicerForX. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. Once again, another shout out to the Reverend Puck for the great overlay that you see if you're watching the video podcast. Thank you very much for the awesome work. But yeah, find us all in there. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on YouTube, Rebelli.net, Rebelli TV. Like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.